Hey, this is Raise Radio, the holistic wisdom podcast for awakening women that weaves food and nutrition, traditional wisdom, spiritual expansion, so that you can feel your best, body, mind, and soul. I'm your host, Raina Lutz. Let's dig in. I want to share with you a post that I put out in June of 2022, which is part of my story around leaving the woke cult. Tanashe, I say hello to you today in my maternal ancestral language of Métis Cree. I am of German, Austrian, Scottish, Irish, and Métis heritage. This isn't a post about how you need to be doing more to support certain communities. It's certainly not that way, because I know that pressure and that pain can render a psyche useless. Rather, I am sharing my story from this particular lens today. I've had my eyes opened to so much around heritage, lineage work, spirituality, human origins, political correctness, shaming, liberal morals, the human family, and harassment in the last few years. So I want to talk about allyship. And in order to do that, I want to tell you about how I approach my job and my relationships. Having worked in wellness and being invited to work at multiple Indian bands in the Syilx territory in the last decade, I love, care for the wellness of, and support Indigenous voices, communities, and the work of my many Indigenous clients and friends. I've never promoted it, and I never thought that I needed to. But when I came out of the proverbial healer's closet, suddenly a light was shone on me that I wasn't expecting. I was born in 1988, which means I didn't learn about residential schools or Indigenous issues really until later in life. And when I did, I slipped into helplessness. On top of the economic crumbling and the fear around all of us at the peak of the pandemic, I suddenly had one of many crises of not understanding the meaning of my existence. In 2020, when I participated in public activism in support of minority communities, something felt off. I couldn't really explain it at the time, but looking back, I know why. I had always been anti-establishment leaning, but in that year, I was catapulted by my personal relationship pains in addition to my eyes being opened to the deep damage by the system. We were all being so very let down at that time, and it all seemed so fake, and I couldn't make sense of the ego and the darkness lurking in it. I could see the destruction and twistedness in it, and I didn't feel it was for me. After all, I was already doing my activism work in the wellness work I do, I thought. More pain came down the line. Continuous food chain bumps, the deep irresponsibility of our leaders. And I was hurting as a person for everyone, for every single human on the planet at that time. We are all at the mercy of this heavy, dark weight on the world that we ourselves have built into and built up. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, looking east at the mountains, and the vision was this big dark shadow crawling over the mountains and like smoke moving through all the mountains and covering my entire province, Canada, and the whole planet. When I first started coming out with my spiritual medicine work, it was the most right kind of work I had ever felt or experienced. It is my purpose. It's my soul's mission to do medicine work. And at first, I wasn't always met with peace. I suddenly had an initiation and a deep dive into the shaming and harassment of those who claimed to be lifting others up. And I suddenly saw that the same system of oppression that we were trying to fight, we had become. As I started to decide that I might need to leave woke culture, my eyes were wide open. You can't submit people into your style of oppression for the good of all. A vicious cycle appeared before my eyes. A tornado I didn't want to be a part of anymore. Woke culture as a tornado of irony, pain, and tyranny. And I decided to fling myself from the tornado, risking social cancellation and an ego death during my long descent. Medicine work is about relationships. It's about seeing systems within yourself, within the world, doing work to change them, make them irrelevant, going around them, and doing your own personal work with them. As my teacher calls it, corruption. Feel your feelings, listening, hearing, and healing. It's about communication, conversation, and community. It's about getting back to the land, feeding it again. It's about nature and trusting and honoring our Creator and our spirits and our soul. Is that not what we all want? I learned that it wasn't. And I was shamed for doing my healing work at a time in the world when you could argue healing was at its most needed. With the help of many, I resolved some pains from my past. I had to deal with my own reaction to the issues. And I learned how to stand my ground or walk away when someone was triggered by me being myself. I focused in on myself. I did my work. I did my ceremony. I journaled. I talked to elders. I felt. I went down rabbit holes. I read, and I dreamed. And I talked to many to seek truth. I made a friend who challenged the ways I walk in this world. She is an Indigenous activist and confirmed my feelings on many things by asking me questions of which I'm appreciative. Even deeper, I began to get back to tradition, to observe the land, to speak to it, to care for it, alter my life to steward it, give it offerings, meditate on it, walk softly on it, and connect even deeper to my work, my lineage, my medicines, my intersections, and my spirit. When I work with Indigenous communities, it is a massive honor to speak to those elders and those who have elders who listen to me when I speak of local food, of whom their ancestors were the first to taste before the devastation of our soil and resources. To honor the knowledge keepers who share their incredible herbal teachings, so they may be used for the bodies who need and appreciate it. I am a Métis woman, and I want to live as my ancestors did. Ochi-Pemiswak is the Cree name for Métis, which translates to the free people, the people who own themselves. This is a name I deeply identify with in my soul. And now looking at all these intersections of myself and where I'm at, the Indigenous folks I work with and everyone all around me, as we are all Indigenous to somewhere, I cannot stress enough to begin to do your own lineage work and learn what your ancestors ate, what they did on the land, where they were. The soil holds stories. So that's what I'm doing, or rather, have always aimed to do, and just needed that nudge and reminder to not fall down. I used to want to be a good ally to Indigenous people because I respect and honor their ways. But now, I cringe at that way of thinking and remember how people who wanted so desperately to do that treated me. It's not about being good or about doing and saying the right things in front of others. It's about showing up as my full self, seeing corruption and removing myself from it, building relationships, and building trust. And with that trust, I am called on to participate in supporting humans the way I know best: food and healing, helping them co-create a life with their version of spirit and support where they are empowered, awakened, strong, and mobilized. Which, as a holistic nutritionist who's helped people change their life and consciousness for many years, see and observe their mental processes, and support local rather than the system, I've always been doing. Which, as a medicine worker who helps people connect to the land, get in touch with their unseen supports and ancestors, and ask the hard questions, I have always been doing. Today, I am exactly where I need to be. I am able to show up as my full self in my life, my work, and my relationships. I do so in ways that I would not have been able to in my early 20s. I had to go through many dark nights, dark windows, and I had to heal much shame and grief in order to see the light. I am so proud I am a woke culture dropout, to add to the list of all the other systems that I have mentally and spiritually removed myself from. Love is underneath all that inner work. We sometimes have to dig deeper than we think to get there. I am still learning about allyship and how to show up for others while taking care of myself. I learned that allyship is a practice rooted in relationships, and relationships require intentional honesty and care. That is a constant for me. What I do know is that sometimes showing up means stepping back and allowing others to take the lead. And sometimes showing up means stepping up and saying something unusual, like explaining one big line of many in my deep internal processes in the last few years. With love, Raven. Thanks for listening. You can find me online at www.rainadonlutz.com.